Hey everyone, so I have a few minutes before I go in and I wanted to do a quick live story time. So the story begins, I'm 18 years old. I'm working as an EKG tech at a big cardiology hospital, and I'm in the surgical ICU, post-surgical cardiac ICU, pretty much where all the cabbage patients would go. And the cardiothoracic surgeon, I would have to do EKGs on these patients every day after post surgery. And quite frankly, being an EKG tech, that was the most boring job ever. But whatever. I had to take the certified cardiographic technician license from CCI, and we had to learn a lot about the rhythm analysis and all the arrhythmias and all that stuff. So whatever. The cardiothoracic surgeon is asking some medical students a question, and I'm there finishing up my EKG, and they don't know. And he looks at me, and I'm like, kind of like I know the answer, but I don't want to answer because I'm not a medical student. I don't want to, interfere. And it was atrial flutter. Nothing, not a big deal. So for some reason, he was impressed that a lowly EKG tech who just puts stickers and presses a button knew the answer. So after he was like, "Oh, what do are you going to school, or whatever?" I told him, "Yeah, I was going to school for ultrasound." So he's like, "Oh, that's very interesting. Maybe you should consider going to school for medicine in the future and stuff like that." So he goes, "If you're ever interested and you want to come see a heart surgery, feel free." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? I would love to." I was like, "When can I go?" I was like, "You can come this afternoon if you want." So after my shift, I went. I was nervous because I was like, "I don't want to go into a surgical department and these people don't know me." So I walked in. They're like, everybody's like, "Who are you?" And I was like, "No, the doctor told me to come, whatever." So then they found him. He got me. He had his staff show me how to scrub. I was crazy nervous too. And then finally, they brought me into the OR. I'm thinking I'm gonna see surgery from afar, and that's how it was at first. So they showed me how to scrub. I scrubbed. The people were very nice, the techs and the fellows and everybody that was there. So I'm standing from afar, and it was another surgeon performing the a valve replacement, a mitral valve replacement, right? And this guy, he looked at me. You could tell he didn't want me in the room. This was an old dude. The guy used to wear cowboy boots, so finally, he left, and the other surgeon's job was to do the CABG, the coronary artery bypass. So once he starts, he's like telling his staff and all the nurses and the fellows or whatever, like, "Oh, can you help him get closer and get him a little stool?" I'm like, "Seriously, you're gonna let me get up close?" And yeah, so they put me real close up to the patient. He starts quizzing me, and I've always loved anatomy, and I've always studied. Even as an EKG tech, I'm always reading and learning. And he was quizzing me about anatomy, and I was like, "Oh my god, I know these answers! How cool!" And everybody was like, "Oh, is he like a medical student?" They're like, "No, he's a EKG tech here, and he's going to school for ultrasound." And they must have been like, "Why the hell is he here?" So whatever. He let me grab the heart. Right, I'm scrubbed in, I'm sterile and all that, gowned and all that stuff. My heart's beating fast as shit. So he lets me hold the heart, and it's so heavy. Obviously, it's connected to all the all the vessels, so it probably weighs a ton, because of all that tension. But I was amazed by how much it weighed. He asked me if, he pointed at the lungs. The patient was a smoker, and you can see the lung was like marbled with like little dark areas. And he's like, "Give the lung a squeeze so you can see the texture of the lung." So I squeezed the lung, and it was like a sponge, and you can see it just like recoil after I squeezed it. It was amazing. So long story short, I saw everything. I saw him do the cabbage. I saw the fellows. I saw what the PAs was doing. One of the PAs was harvesting the saphenous vein from the leg, which is cool because he was doing that by himself. And I'm like, wow, I didn't realize the PA was able to do all of that. And then he invited me to come a few more days. I think that same day after they finished with that, I'm in like cloud nine because I'm like, dude, there's no way I'm here allowed to see this cool stuff. So he takes me to another room, which with a patient who had an aortic dissection. So he asked the other surgeons, like, "Do you mind if he takes a peek just so you see what a dissection looks like?" And I went, and the other surgeon showed me. It was a very small area, but you could see the tear on the intima. And I was like, so cool. Honestly, at that point, I didn't even know what a dissection was. I knew some stuff about anatomy, but I didn't have a great deal of knowledge of a lot of things. So for like the next week, after work, I would work. After my shift, I'd go and scrub in. And I saw several cabbages because that was his specialty. At one point, he asks, at the end of the surgery, he's like, "Oh, if you have um, the heart was fibrillating after the surgery because they had, I guess, taken the potassium off." And he's like, "Oh, if you have a heart and ventricular fibrillation, what's the treatment? I'm like, oh my God, I hope I don't get this wrong. You know, it would have been fine if I got it wrong. I mean, I was just an EKG tech. But I was like, I don't know, it's a shock, maybe defibrillation, right? Defibrillation. And he goes, you're absolutely right. Here are the paddles. I'm going to tell you when, and you can shock the patient back into a normal sinus rhythm. Excuse me? I'm pretty sure none of this was allowed, but I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. You know, I don't know the details of how the hospitals work and the inner workings of, you know, those areas. So yeah, you know, they did the whole thing just like in the movies. Clear. He told me to press the buttons of it was like two paddles, right? And immediately the heart went into normal sinus rhythm. So just craziness. And then let me see, I have a few more minutes. And it was cool because in that case they're also doing a transesophageal echo. So, you know, of course he's telling everybody, or he was telling the anesthesiologist, he's like, oh, I quiz him on the echo stuff. And I was like, oof, I don't know anything about TEE. I was just starting ultrasound school. So he's asking me like, and I'm like kind of making guesses and getting some of the guesses right about the valves and the fact that the blood is anechoic. So that was pretty cool too. All in all, I went to a few cases, but it was a very, very, very interesting experience. I would leave every day pretty late. Actually, I would get to the hospital at 7 in the morning. My shift was from 7 to 3, and I'll stay literally from like 3 to 11, just like watching these things and hanging out with his students, where he had students from Miami-Dade College that were PA students. And in fact, one of the funny thing is one of the PA students was the medical assistant for my old pediatrician. So this was a while back. I was 18, and it was an amazing experience. I'm glad it happened. Things like that don't normally happen. I've worked at other places where, doctors have pretty much taken me under the wing and let me see things too. I remember I also worked at another hospital where the OBGYNs loved me and I loved them. We had a great relationship. They were always trying to get me to like leave the hospital and work in their private practices that were on campus of the hospital. And they're like, hey, if you ever want to see anything, like a C-section, just let us know. We'll let you come in. So it was cool because every time a new student would start, I would ask them, do you want to see a C-section? Because normally, you're not going to see stuff like that as a student. And of course, they'd always say yes. And I'd take them to the C-sections, and some of them would be like, oh my God. But some of them you can see, like, they'd get like pale, and I get scared, like, oh my God, I hope the student doesn't like pass out during the C-section. But, also sometimes when I'd scan a patient, like one time they had an abruption of the placenta. I spoke to the doctor. He's like, okay, so we're gonna take it real quick. The OB department, that was like a triage department, they had a surgical room right there for emergencies, and they're like, oh, we're gonna take her in right now for the abruption. Do you want to stick around and see? So I was able to see that. So, it's just cool to have these experiences. Sometimes as technologists, as sonographers, a lot of my followers are from other countries where the doctors do the ultrasounds, but in America, the ultrasound techs do the ultrasounds, right? But we're not often treated as equals to, definitely not to the medical staff, to doctors or fellows and residents, and not even as equal to nursing staff. And a lot of people in allied health, know what I'm talking about. So it's cool to meet physicians and, even nurses. Nurses are usually very, very cool. They're always asking me questions about ultrasounds. And they're like, oh my God, you know so much. And the first thing I tell them is like, look, you know so much too, because you're talking hanging all these medicines and these titration rates. I don't know anything about that. So obviously we have our own knowledge in our own siloed areas of specializations. So it's just cool that I had those experiences. I thought about it, it was a while back. I'm 37 years old now. I was 18 at the time. So that was pretty cool. I was for sure, I had always wanted to go to medical school, but obviously financial issues always kept me from going to medical school. But after that, I was like, oh my God, I have to go to medical school. But of course, again, financial issues, pretty much living on my own with my wife, and we had kids. It never panned out. Um, in fact, when I was working at the other hospital, I delivered a baby, which I've shared it here before. There's an old YouTube video. It's like maybe I think it's like 13 years ago. I don't even remember. It was a long time ago. But I delivered a baby. That was breech. And the hospital made a huge deal about it. It was awesome. I was like, oh, he's a hero. The Red Cross gave me an award. The hospital made me Employee of the Year. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done that because, like, who the hell knows Henry inside a big hospital with thousands of employees? But whatever. I shared that video on here before. If you guys want, I'll share it again. It's funny. I'm short-haired. I'm a little chubbier. But after that happened, I was like, man, yes, I got to go back to medical school. So, I've always been like, throughout the years, like, damn, I got to go back to medical school. I got to go. But alas, the, the circumstances haven't really changed. And I'm 37 now, so it's a little old to go to medical school. But I am working on my bachelor's for ultrasound. To then, I don't know what the next step is after that. So thank you guys for sticking around. It's 10:56, so now I'm gonna go clock in. I'm sorry I was talking fast and relaying the story before I ran out of time. I didn't get to see anybody's comments, but to all of you that comment, thank you. I get to see a lot of births with midwives and birthing centers, perks of doing their ultrasounds. That's awesome. So yeah, I just hope you guys enjoyed the story, and for students and for people who've been doing ultrasound for a long time, hope you find some inspiration in that. And when you've been doing ultrasound or any healthcare profession or any job really for a long time, you get burned out. And I always tell people, teach people. It keeps it new. And honestly, a few years ago, I was really burned out with ultrasound. And doing the IG and the YouTube and all the teaching and the website that I created has really reinvigorated my love for all of this stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed the story. I'm gonna share it onto, like, I guess the timeline, so people who didn't catch it can maybe catch it and maybe glean some inspiration from it. It was a very cool experience. All right, bye.